for the 503. Welcome to the League of Women Voters of Snohomish County Forum for candidates for the City of Bothell, Council Positions 2 and 6. I'm Nadine Shanti, and I'm a member of the League. This forum is being live streamed to our League YouTube channel. To those in the virtual space, thank you for joining us. A recording of the forum will be available on this same YouTube channel for later viewing. Let me provide some background on the position first. Council members manage basic public services like sewer, water, fire, police, roads, and parks. They establish and enforce local laws, control how land can be used, and provide direction to the mayor or the city manager. They manage relationships with other governments, nonprofits, and businesses for the benefits of city residents. Candidates for Bothell Council Position 6 are Amanda Dodd and Thomas Agnew. Candidates for Position 2 are Mason Thompson and James McNeil. Welcome, candidates. It is the policy of the League to be nonpartisan. Therefore, we neither endorse nor oppose candidates or parties. The rules for participation in this forum were sent ahead of time to all candidates. I will pose the questions and clearly state the amount of time allowed for each answer. We are using a countdown timer visible to all candidates, and time limits on answers will be strictly enforced. I will change the order of questions for each question, alternating candidates in the starting position to ensure a fair sequence. The order for the first question will be Thomas Agnew, then Amanda Dodd, and Mason Thompson. Let's begin. The candidates will have 2 minutes to respond to the first question, and it goes to Mr. Agnew. What are the major issues you feel need to be addressed by this office? And please explain why you are focusing on these issues. Mr. Agnew, you're muted. We need to.
I knew I was going to do that. Thank you for the opportunity to talk a little bit. I think some of the major issues that we have in the city are fiscal responsibility is one. We need to be very responsible with the funding that we have and with our spending of those funding. We also need to look at infrastructure. We need to look at traffic. Traffic seems to be an issue. I don't think it's going to go away, but it's an issue. We also need to look at, and I think is one of the primary jobs of council, is public safety. And how are we set with public safety? Are we adequate? Do we need to expand on anything? And do we look at options for maybe changing the way it's set up? Most small municipal cities can't afford a fire department and a police department. And if that be the case, then we need to look at options that we may find available to us. So I think those are the major issues that I'd like to address and talk about and work with on this dais. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Dodd, same question.
Thank you. And thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. Some of the biggest issues for me, they're all kind of interconnected. So we are mandated by the state to accommodate growth targets. Bothell is in 2 counties, so we get targets from each county. And along with growth comes traffic, comes public safety expansion, comes parks and open spaces that we need for more residents because we have more people sharing what we have. So really for me, I want to see us meet our obligation under state law. Bothell grows as part of the urban growth area so that we can protect our more natural areas in the state. But having lived in Bothell for 30 years from age 5 to now 35, I really just think that we've kind of missed the mark a little bit. Housing has gotten very expensive here. And while our budget has gotten a lot better in the last few years with a lot of careful consideration and a lot of making sure that we're making responsible choices as a city, I really think that as we grow, we need to look at ways to do so that really look toward the future and climate change and just a future where my son is 8, so I always think about him, but where all of our kids can afford housing where they want to work and just find ways to live in Bothell without paying as much as we have to now. So really the cost of housing, transportation options, ensuring that we have a great fire, police, EMS, and crisis response system, great infrastructure that allows people to drive or bike or walk or roll. Really just make sure that everyone in Bothell has a lot of choices. I feel like right now we don't have so many choices. So just expanding those is my main point. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Thompson, same question.
Thank you so much, Nadine. The major issues I hear about from Bothell residents are housing, transportation, taxes, and climate change. The good news is that the first two are directly under city control, and doing the right thing for housing and transportation is also the right thing for reducing pressure on property taxes and climate change. The challenge is that everything that we don't like about the way things are have been caused by the way things are. And if we want different results in the future, we have to do things that are a little different. And change is hard because Bothell residents have already seen a lot of it, and it hasn't always made Bothell a better place to live. But if we don't change the way we do things, we'll just continue the trajectory that we're on. And that means that all of our problems will keep getting worse. Now, I think it's important to start with values. Policy decisions are always a what, but they aren't always a why. And if we only talk about policy, we miss the values behind them. I care about future opportunities for our kids because the work we do right now affects the context that they will build their lives in. I care about climate change and preserving the natural environment, about building a city that can be solvent over the long term without needing new levies that raise taxes every few years to pay for basic needs like road, police, and fire. I'm focusing on these issues because Bothell needs leadership that's willing to do the hard work of meaningfully addressing the biggest problems we face instead of kicking the can down the road to our kids. I'm going to quote Teddy Roosevelt. That farmer is a poor creature who skins the land and leaves it worthless to his children. The farmer is a good farmer who, having enabled the land to support himself and to provide for the education of his children, leaves it to them a little better than he found it himself. I believe the same thing of a nation. I believe the same thing of a city. We're not leaving our children even the same housing opportunity we were left. And I know Bothell cares about our kids, and we can do better.
Thank you. This next question, we've got 90 seconds to answer. If you would reset the timer, I'd appreciate it. We're going to start with Ms. Dodd. Your question is, what qualifications and experience make you a good choice to address these issues?
Thank you. Well, I've lived here for 30 years. When I moved here at 5 in 1993, Bothell had about 25,000 people. We're butting up on 50,000 now. I'm now in adulthood and motherhood. We do some things a lot better now. We have a lot more sidewalks than we used to, but we still don't have a complete network. We still have a lopsided park system with a clear delineation at the county line, unfortunately. And we still have inequity in how we grow. We need to build a climate resilient city that can foster our next generation. I spent 2 years roughly on our planning commission, appointed unanimously by the city council at the time, because I just took an interest in how our city grows. Having seen so much change in Bothell, having seen so many of my friends' houses growing up, going from one house on a big lot to 10 houses that my parents could never hope to afford was really startling for me. And I started to wonder, could I afford to live here? I became very lucky in adulthood and I was able to buy a home. And I saw this sense of like, well, if you can't buy a house, just try harder. And I thought, is that really what it is? People just aren't trying hard enough? Because I don't think I could ever tell someone that couldn't afford a home, oh, well, try harder. So I started to wonder why are housing prices going up? Who's benefiting? And really just studying and learning. And so I have taken that. I really think that fixing our climate problems and fixing our homelessness problems involve just better housing choice. So I'm here for housing and I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. Mr. Thompson, same question.
I think the best qualities in an elected official are empathy, curiosity, and courage. And we need more people in office who genuinely care about the struggles faced in our community and are curious what we can do about those problems that will actually make them better. And courage, not in the sense of not being scared, because we all get scared, but the willingness to stick to values and do the right thing, even when it's hard. I also think it's important for elected officials to really listen to the entire community, including people they disagree with. I've reached out to members of our community like Ann Agard, Patrick Ewing, Suzanne Burnell to talk middle housing, a subject that we disagree on, to meet at their home for a beer and for coffee, to dialogue and attempt to understand. And it's important to recognize, I think, that people who disagree with you are well-meaning, and I try to assume good faith. Also, in order to listen to the whole community, you have to seek them out, because the whole community won't just come to us. I have been down every road in Bothell, knocking on doors over the last 2 election cycles to do just that with every type of Bothellite you can imagine. And I'm humbled that approach has earned the respect of our elected peers. My campaign's been endorsed by Representatives Duran Kloba, Senator Stanford, County Council members Dembowski, Perry, and Mead, Executives Constantine and Sommers, and Congresswoman Delbene. So a vote for me is a vote for representation who will work hard and care about you, regardless of what we agree on or don't.
Thank you. Mr. Agnew, same question.
Excuse me. I spent about 12 years on Bothell City Council. Seen some good, seen some bad. Worked with both sides of the aisle. And I think that's important. I think if we're going to move forward, we have to be able to work with both sides of the aisle. And I achieved a lot of things doing that. 12 years is a long time on the dais, as my constituents know. I like what Mason said about courage. I like what Mason said about Teddy Roosevelt. I love Teddy Roosevelt, but I spent 30 years as a firefighter paramedic, just trying to solve problems and do it with a common sense approach. And I'd bring that common sense approach to the dais also. And I want to listen to everyone. And you can't make a decision if you're not well informed. So I think I have that aptitude. I think I've shown that I care for the city. My wife and I have been here for 42 years. It was only 8,000 people when we moved in, but it's grown considerably. But I think experience says a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to allow 90 seconds for this question, since some of you really did want to get into homelessness a little bit and give us some ideas about that. If I could start with Mr. Thompson, my question is this. Homelessness is a growing issue for many in our communities. As a council member, what solutions would you propose?
I think anytime that we are talking about homelessness and we're not talking about allowing more housing, and specifically more modest housing, whatever we're talking about is a Band-Aid, not a real solution. I also think that too often the discussion devolves into, should we allow people to live in parks or not? And that's a conversation that's guaranteed to not solve the problem of people living outside. I think that we should allow the market to provide housing to the biggest cross-section of residents possible, so that we have as few people that we need to subsidize and as few people living outside as possible. A common question I get about this when I talk to residents is drug use. And I want to address this because people in housing are complex and a lot of issues are interconnected. Drug use is often seen alongside homelessness, and both can lead to each other, but neither is a good reason to not address the other problem. People need housing. People need help getting off drugs. Both are true. I'm committed to being part of the solution around homelessness, because I'd rather have people living in different types of housing than we allow right now than living outside.
Thank you. Mr. Agnew, same question.
Well, it's a interesting dilemma that we have in here, and there's a number of options that we have. And I agree with Mason that it's just a Band-Aid, whatever we do. We need to find facilities for people. We need to try to help them out. A lot of the homeless, or a percentage of the homeless, have mental illness. We need to work on that. They have drug addictions. We need to work on that. We also need to give them an opportunity to be successful. So I feel that if we had a training program for some of these people, it would help dramatically. And they could stop being homeless and be productive members of society. We all know that with addiction, you can send people to the programs and a third of them will be successful, and that's great. But unfortunately, a third of them will relapse and another third will die. And that's just sad. And I've seen too much of that death in my career. So I think it's a multifaceted solution that needs to be with the feds and the state and the county and the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Dodd, same question, your thoughts.
Thank you. I'm going to go a slightly different route. I really appreciate a lot of the academic work that's being done to understand why certain parts of the U.S., like where we live, see higher rates of homelessness than others. Colburn and Aldern really dug into that in their book, Homelessness is a Housing Problem, because it looks at why certain regions more than others have homelessness at such high rates, because we don't actually see substance abuse or mental health problems at a higher rate in Bothell or in Seattle in our area. It's not that we just have worse luck than other parts of the country. It's not our criminal statutes. It's not the state of local politics. It was kind of shockingly simple when I was researching this personally. It's about the cost of living in a home and specifically the cost of rent. Our housing is so expensive that we price people out. And when you are struggling with mental illness or addiction, or you just have a run of bad luck because so many people are living paycheck to paycheck, because housing is so expensive here, the impact is that much more when you can't afford that month's rent. You're unlikely to be able to find a vacancy, and it exacerbates the problem that we have as a region. Encouraging more housing that is attainable to a spectrum of incomes is a huge part of this to me, making sure that we have lots of types of housing that different people at different income levels can access, and also electing people who have ideas on how to fix our housing supply. I'm really been honored to work on the King County Cities Climate Coalition, which is a regional partnership, and to be endorsed by the mayors of all of our neighbors, both people on both county councils, our U.S. congressperson, just to really make this a regional solution. Thank you.
Thank you. If we could allow 60 seconds for the answer to this question, please reset the clock. And I'd like to start with Mr. Agnew this time. My question is, all local jurisdictions are required to update their comprehensive plans in 2024. What changes or additions to those plans would you suggest?
Well, I think first we need to look at if we can make some changes to help climate change. I think we need to definitely look at that. Developers are coming in now and just ripping out trees and not planting any new trees. And I'm not saying new trees are going to be the answer, because they're not. But I think we need to definitely look at that. We need to look at building affordable housing for people that are near transit lines. And that should help some people. Affordable housing, not right now, what is it, $1.6 million for an average house in Bothell? I mean, it's ridiculous. I couldn't afford that. I know my kids couldn't afford that. So I'd like to look at affordable housing, and I'd like to look at climate change as first two things I want to work on. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Dodd, same question.
Thank you. I think what's going to be interesting about this next comprehensive plan is all the state law changes that will go into it. We must account for middle housing. Our 2015 plan did say we should look at it, but now we have to. We also can't refuse to allow less than 2 units per lot. Individual people can choose what they want on their property, but we can't prevent it like we do now. The other thing is we're going to have to accommodate growth targets set to specific incomes. So we're going to have to plan for housing that is affordable to people across the spectrum of income. Which just, again, goes into all of our different problems are really tied together. And of course, House Bill 1181 passed this past session, which requires us to plan for climate impacts. The biggest thing that I want to see personally are tree canopy protections. I think that we can't always save every tree. But I do think that we can do a lot better just planting trees everywhere we can, every bit of right of way we have in our open spaces that we're preserving. We could have so many more trees and really do a lot of work on climate through this process.
Thank you. Mr. Thompson, your thoughts?
Thank you. I thought Ms. Dodd had great things to say. The first thing I want to say is that we get growth targets from the state. You can't vote for somebody who's going to stop growth in Bothell, but you can vote for somebody who's willing to try to grow better. Now, we have two basic options to meet what the state requires of us. We either need to allow more and bigger apartments in the 35% of the city that we allow for multifamily housing, or we have to allow more housing units in the 65% of the city that is currently zoned for single family only. And what I'm leaning toward is a mix of both. The state passed a middle housing bill that does some of that work for us, but in Bothell, there would be different requirements for different neighborhoods depending on how far they are from transit. Now, we might be in two counties, but we're one city. And the more you spread out growth, the less it affects any one neighborhood. So I think we should have a uniform approach citywide to middle housing, and we should make up the difference in our existing multifamily areas.
Thank you. Ms. Dodd, same question.
Oh, I just answered before Mason.
Did it again. Actually, have you all answered the questions about the comprehensive plan? Okay, here we go. I'd like to do 90 seconds here for this, please. And I'm starting with Thomas Agnew. Since all of you seem to be concerned about the climate change, let's see if we can drill down a little bit on that. What actions, if any, would you propose to respond to our changing climate? Mr. Agnew. And we're going to allow 90 seconds for that. There you
Thanks,
go.
Amanda. Yeah, I'd like to see us reduce the emissions if we can. I know that we're going more and more to electric and hybrid vehicles, and I think that's great. I know that we should probably go more solar in a lot of areas that we can. Like Amanda said, I think the tree canopy is an issue that we can address, and we can put more trees in our city on both sides of the line. We have a Bothell company that's called Modern Hydrogen, and it's finding cost-effective ways to turn natural gas emissions into clean-burning hydrocarbons. And I think we're going to see more and more of that coming into existence in the future, hopefully. I mean, what have I done? I got a Tesla out in the front yard, and I'm trying to do things, and it's not for me. It's for my grandkids, because they're the ones that are going to suffer through this. And we can kid ourselves all we want, but climate change is here. It's here. And I don't know if we've tipped over that fork or that pendulum, but we're awfully close if we haven't. Thank you.
Mr. Thompson, your thoughts?
Thank you. And thank you for asking this question, because it's really important and way more relevant to this office than I think a lot of the public realizes. The two biggest causes of climate pollution in Washington are buildings and transportation, and we leave decisions around those pretty much in the hands of city councils. The greenest areas where people use the least carbon in their lifespan are the areas in which they live closest to each other. Proximity is efficiency in both time and climate pollution. And we realize less pollution when you need to cover less distance to meet your daily needs. And what we're really talking about here is something we probably all agree on, is we need to reduce traffic. And there are two ways to do that. Either people need to take fewer trips in their car, or they need to drive a little less distance for the trips that they do take. When we build for more proximity, we can realize a little bit of both and a little less traffic at the same time. And it's important to face the reality of the now, knowing that there's not going to be this like hard moment in time when transportation is now completely different and it's changed. People are still going to need cars to get around, and a lot of people aren't going to bike in the winter. But since there's not going to be that instant moment, we have to consistently make incremental progress. We should make it easier for people who walk, bike, or roll to get safely around, so more folks will choose that. Something we've done in Bothell with a bike plan that I believe features more protected lanes than any other city in the area. And the last part is housing. More modest attached buildings are far more energy efficient than larger, more expensive detached buildings, which are the only kind we allow in most of the city.
Thank you. Now, if you would reset the clock for 60 seconds, this is our last question, one that I absolutely adore. And I'd like to start with Ms. Dodd. Please tell us something about your life experience that might surprise or intrigue voters.
I appreciated getting this advance because I honestly don't know that I'm a very surprising person. So I've said, I grew up in Bothell. I've lived here for about 30 years with little, apartment. I had an apartment in Shoreline for a while when I was in my 20s, but mostly Bothell. And my parents both came from Puget Sound, one from Issaquah, one from Seattle. And so my family is all here. And I've really enjoyed, I wasn't always sure about living where I grew up. But I've really enjoyed just the evolution of knowing people in Bothell. So I'm still in touch with like my Girl Scout troop leader and the people that were in my Girl Scout troop in kindergarten. And, my fellow nerds from Bothell High School. I hope nobody feels called out. And I even have coworkers now that work at the same company that I do that live in Bothell. So you just have these networks that grow and change, and it's really delightful. Otherwise, super quickly, I know we don't have a lot of time. I'm a single mom to an 8-year-old boy. I got engaged at the beginning of the year, so I'm getting married next year. I'm a technical account manager in my full-time job. So my job is to know the right answer, walk people through how to get there, and help them fix things without judgment if they don't listen to me the first time. So I would say that's a lot like parenting. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Thompson, same question.
Thank you. I was kicked out of school when I was young. I was ADHD, immature, and couldn't cope. I've been divorced. I've gotten fired. I've had a house foreclosed on. I've had 2 emergency brain surgeries, one in Bangkok after a medevac flight from rural Cambodia, where I was about 24 hours away from dying, crying in a hospital bed, wondering what my wife and 1-year-old were going to do alone. We've lost a child to miscarriage, and when I got asked to run for the first time, I was 39, working retail, making $60,000 a year, wondering how I was going to provide for my family in an area that is so expensive. So I guess I just want people to know that I am the type of person who struggles and suffers. And if you are struggling and suffering, and you want representation that really knows what that's like and will fight hard to do the right thing for you, I would be honored to have your support.
Thank you. Mr. Agnew. Unmute.
I don't know what to tell you. I mean, I'm the oldest of 10. I guess we can start with that. That's kind of weird. I spent some time in the military. I learned how to be a medic in the military. I was a medic on a helicopter in Vietnam. Came back and went to work with the paramedic program as one of the original paramedics at Medic 6 down Auburn Federal Way. Lateraled up to Shoreline and did the rest of my career up there. My wife and I, we've lived here for 42 years. We've gone to the same church for 42 years in downtown Bothell, Bothell First Lutheran. She ran the emergency room at Harborview Medical Center, and then she ran Airlift Northwest. Other than that, we've had a pretty benign life. Thank you very much.
You are welcome. The League thanks these candidates for joining us and for running for office. A recording of this forum and others will be available on the League of Women Voters of Snohomish County website and our YouTube channel. Find links at lwvsnoho.org. That's lwvsnoho.org. We encourage you to explore additional information about these and all candidates. The Snohomish County voter pamphlet will be mailed starting October 18th. Vote411.org, sponsored by the League, is another good source of information. Ballots will be mailed starting October 18th, and Election Day is November 7th. Please be a voter. Thank you to our League Candidate Forum team, and special thanks to Dave Moon and the Sultan School students at TurkPride.tv, who made this live stream possible. And of course, thank you all for joining us. This concludes our candidate forum.